So recently artist Josiah released his new album Mount Zion, and it's about what you'd expect from the past stuff that he's put out. And the whole album comes together really nicely, all the songs sort of tie into each other, but there's something about the last song on the album that's sort of unnerving. If you've listened through the album, you probably know what I'm talking about. All the songs sort of have this upbeat, warm feel to them. Even if they're one of the slower ones, they still have this bit of hope kind of baked into it. But something about this last song just sounds like cold and empty, and the lyrics and melodic stuff kind of going on seems to contradict what we've heard earlier in the album, and I want to be able to explain that a little bit better today. So let's go ahead and look into why the last song off Mount Zion, Adonai, has kind of this unnerving, out of place feel in like the best way possible. Before we get into the musical side or the lyrics, I want to look at the sound design and the instrumental choice that went into making this song. Because as we look at what choices were made to put this song together, I think it'll really help tell us what story they're trying to get across with this last song on the album. See, the last song on the album is probably one of the most important ones on the album, right next to the opener and the second song. Those two are trying to get you hooked, kind of setting up the thesis for what the album's going to be, and the last song is going to be closing it. So clearly this one would have a lot of attention and detail put into it, so there must be some kind of message you're trying to get across with it sounding so tonally different. The first thing that I want to point out here is the use of the ukulele. So we think about what Josiah Queen's instrumental sound is known for, the guitar usually. And what's a ukulele but kind of a shrunken down, shifted version of the guitar? The ukulele kind of has this feel of being a guitar but not quite, like something is just kind of off about it, which I think kind of helps play into this kind of off feeling that we have when listening to the song. This last song on the album is also the only one where the ukulele shows up. I believe there's one other song where it's a little bit in the background, but this is the only one where it's the main focus of a song. And any other time that there is a ukulele in this song, it always has tons of other instruments supporting it. This is really the only time in the album where we're met with just the ukulele, and there's nothing else. You can really hear every movement on the string, the pick as it slides across, and kind of this empty sound that it has. Think sort of playing to a big concert hall or something like that. And the thing is, all the songs on this album kind of have a similar structure dynamically. They all start off pretty slow, maybe with the chorus, sort of build during the verse, pop up all the way to the chorus again, and kind of continue with that same volume, drop down during a bridge, kind of come back for one last go of it. And that's generally kind of the flow. The slow ones are pretty much the same, just a little bit different with their structure, but this one doesn't really build at all. If you take the start of the song and compare it to the middle where it should be the loudest, not really much has changed. A couple instruments have been added, sure, but it's still pretty much the same, just bass ukulele stuff going on here, which is kind of tricking us out because this whole album we've been building up this kind of expectation of what we expect a song to be, and this one just keeps flipping it on its head. We're expecting the song to kind of build and get to some sort of climax, but it never comes, and it kind of keeps teasing our ear, waiting for when it's going to happen, which gives us a sort of uneasy feeling because we're expecting this thing to come and it just never does. Specifically in the chorus, it sounds like there's a tiny little bit of piano and some backing vocals, and that sounds like that's pretty much all that's really supporting it. There also is, interestingly enough, instead of a drum kit, which you might normally hear, it's like an egg shaker. But specifically when I hear it, what I think it sounds like is like a snake rattling its tail. I'll put in a little clip here so you can hear it. And normally when you think of snakes, it's usually not good things. The first thing that comes to mind when I heard this was some kind of snake trying to pull some deception or something like that. And as the song starts, there's just a little bit of the rattle, but as it goes along, the rattling builds more and more to the part where it's right up in your face. So already we're getting some interesting ideas about how he plays with our expectations from what we've built up throughout the rest of the album, and kind of these ideas of preconceived notions with snakes, ukulele, that kind of stuff, also tying into it. But I want to go ahead and look at what's going on more musically now, because there's a lot of interesting stuff there that's happening as well. So I want to go ahead and start with the chords that play during this song. The chords that we get are C major, E major 7, and then it switches to regular E major, A minor, G major, and F. And that progression sounds like this. And then right before it goes back into the chorus to repeat that same chord progression, it just does a F to G or a 4 to 5, just to build up going into it, like this. So as I played that chord progression, you probably noticed that the second chord in there had so much tension and grit. It gives it this intense feeling that like no other chord really has. And the reason why it's pretty interesting is because it's actually not from the key that we're in. So see, normally when we pick the chords for a song, we have 7 notes and then we base the chords off those 7 notes that we have in the key. And if you were to do that for C major, which is the song that this one is in, and start on the E note and build out the chord, you would get an E minor, which sounds like this. And you can hear that has a lot less tension than the E major chord that we played earlier. So what we're doing to give that chord more tension is taking the third or the middle note and raising it up by a half step to make it a E major chord. And the thing about the E major chord is it actually relates to A minor more than it does C major. It sounds a little complicated at first, but it's pretty simple when you think about it. So there's 7 notes in the C major scale that we know, starting on C, and you just go up every white note. But if you start on the note A and then do the same thing, go up just every white note, you'll have an A minor scale. You can hear it's the same notes, but one is definitely major and one is definitely minor. But here's the thing, the musicians, they like to have the last note of the scale be a half step away. That way it has something called a leading tone and has more of a pull towards the home of the key. So it has it in the major scale with the B going to C like this. But in a minor scale, a natural minor scale, it doesn't. It has a whole step like this. And you can hear there's a bit less resolution. So what musicians typically do is raise that last note, that way it's just a half step away, so it'd be more like this. And when they do that, they're actually changing the 5 of the key from a minor 5 to a major 5. So let me break it down specifically for the example that we have for this song. So A minor, if you look at all the notes, you'd have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. They're raising that G to be a G sharp, which is giving it that half step connection. And then that's what's making the E minor chord, which would normally be E, G, and B, E, G sharp, B. So when he's using the E major chord, it has this context of being from the minor equivalent, and that's what gives it so much grit and tension into the song. But he doesn't just stop there. It's not just an E major chord, it's an E7. The difference being this. Can hear that top note gives it a little bit more grit, and the reason for this is because when you add that 7th on top, it's actually making it a diminished chord. And if all of that kind of flew over your head and doesn't make any sense, just know that the E major chord has a lot of tension because it comes from the A minor scale, and that adding that 7th on there gives it even more tension. The other part of it that I want to point out is this walk down where it goes from A minor to G to F. If we go ahead and look at how those notes would look on a piano, you can see that the A note would be about here, the G is down to the left of it, or moving down, getting like lower into the bass, and then F is to the left of that. And whenever you have a walk down like this, it creates a sort of sinking feeling that makes it kind of sound like almost sad and kind of like a closing feel. So he's utilizing this walk down in tandem with this tense E major 7 chord to add all this tension into it. And that's what's creating such like this interesting sound to it as well. All right, sorry, that was a lot of musical stuff. Thanks for sticking through that. Let's go ahead and look a bit into the lyrics because there's also some interesting stuff. The first thing that I kind of noticed when listening to the lyrics is that they all flow together, like I mentioned earlier, but it just seems like he doesn't want to ever stop singing. Like he gets to the end of a phrase and kind of continues going with humming, or gets to the end of like the phrase and starts another verse, and it feels like he's just grasping on to continuing like holding on to this song, which I think will be important later on at the end. The other thing that directly stuck out to me is the name of the song is Adonai, which is the Hebrew name for God, but the way that he says it in the song sounds like he's saying I deny. And I'll play a little clip for you so you can hear it too, so I don't sound completely crazy, but like especially as the song goes on, it sounds like he's shifting a lot more into saying that instead. So when I heard this, I thought maybe my pronunciation of this Jewish word was just completely wrong, and I've always had it wrong, and he had it right the whole time. So I figured I would have to get someone who knows what they're doing. So I went ahead and found a Hebrew student, someone who's like learning biblical Hebrew right now. It's just my mom, actually, but she is learning it. So I asked her, and she said, no, it is pronounced more with a do instead of a duh sound. So Donai, not Dunai. So it's probably just sort of the country accent that he sings with. But then the question comes up, I'm sure this song went through multiple people, producers, all the like, and nobody would think to comment that it sounds like I deny, when that seems like kind of a pretty important thing to have like distinguished in your song. Because when you think about all the elements that we've looked at kind of put together, the rattling sound of this snake bringing in deception, the reverb on this ukulele, this tiny guitar sounding vast and empty, the chords having a lot of tension with this sinking feeling, and the lyrics sounding like it literally says I deny, what's going on? Because my first reaction is that this whole album is sort of, you know, a praise album, and then in the last one it sounds like he's saying he denies all of that. That doesn't seem quite right, or the note that you'd want to end this album on, saying that like everything else has kind of been a lie up to this point. And originally it kind of stumped me, and I was going to end the video here with that conclusion. But after talking it through with some friends and figuring out what they had to think about it, I think I know probably what's going on here. It's pretty important as we look at what the last part of this song is. It is what ties together the entire album and this song as a whole. So at the very end, the last part of this entire album and the song, the lyrics go like this. At the tail of the road, my life starts at the end of my control. Once I let it go, my own plans, in your hands, I've found a home. And I think what this is getting at is not a denial of who this album was made for, but it's a denial of self. When you look at this entire album, all the songs sort of tie into this idea of leaving behind his old self and being able to come into what is new. And I think that's also kind of why it has this meandering breathlessness to it. Like he doesn't really want to let go. Of course he does, but there's still that part that just doesn't want to let it end. And I think using all this musical and melodic ideas to make a song that sounds so totally different from the stuff that came before to really help us highlight and get the point of what this whole album is all about, I think is done super well. And that's why Josiah Queen's Adonai song has so much of an unnerving feel to it. Not because he's denying what the entire album was, but he's denying himself.